So ultimately, we really don't want fleets to have to think about energy, right? I mean, for the last 70, 80, 100 years, they relied on external sources of energy. They've had the ExxonMobil's of the world or the whichever large petroleum-based product manufacturers and providers to simply come in, bring them fuel, they plug in the fuel into their vehicle, the vehicle drives away knowing that the fuel is there and it's going to work. We think that electrification should follow the exact same thing. We don't think transportation folks and fleet managers and fleet owners and operators should have to.
Today I brought on Ryan Monahan, Director of Business Development of a company called Electrada. Electrada offers an end-to-end charging-as-a-service solution for companies looking to electrify their fleets without the complexity and costs of infrastructure and equipment. Previously, Ryan led business strategy at VIA and Deloitte, and he's concurrently teaching corporate strategy at a university. Standing at 6'5", he's also played basketball overseas. Ryan joined Electrada early in 2024 to help expand the electrification of commercial fleets. In this conversation, we talk about their unique business model and the processes surrounding it. This is Earth ABC, featuring Ryan Monahan.
¿Cómo estás, señor Ryan? Thanks for joining me today. How do you do?
Estoy excelente. Everything is great here. Really happy to have the chance to chat with you, Sean.
Muy bien. So in our first conversation, I was pleasantly surprised by the many pieces of quote-unquote dad lore you're building up for yourself right now. Do you have any hidden talents or hobbies that might surprise us? Maybe something related to sports, teaching, or travel?
Wow, it really feels like you served that one up. I've been really into a number of different sports over my life. I played basketball since the beginning, including some kind of semi-professional stuff in Latin America and Peru when I was there for some time. Also got really into rugby for a while, playing in a couple different countries with some clubs and boxing. Had a couple amateur fights. That's kind of a new fact for some people. So yeah,
that's a new fact for me.
Yeah, just a lot of I guess like physically related things, and of course like a deep love for nature and the environment. So a lot of outdoorsy related activities, all the hiking, climbing, all that kind of stuff, camping, and more than anything, just traveling and getting to know other industries, other cultures, other people, other customs has been a big part of, I think, my journey to date.
Yeah, definitely a really active lifestyle that you're leading. Let's lead with an active conversation today. You're way too humble. You say you played basketball professionally overseas, but you were on the Peruvian national team, and it was like a side quest for you. And wow, that's a really cool fun fact. So how has that like experience influenced your approach to building like connections and partnerships in the EV charging industry?
Well, to be fair, it was the Peruvian National League, not the specific team. But
okay.
But yeah, I mean, so I think that as you embrace putting yourself in different environments and different scenarios with different groups of people, it helps to perhaps build more empathy and understanding of where other people come from. It helps to, I think, build trust around different styles of communication and different types of stakeholders with whom you find yourself working in many different work contexts. And through all those experiences, I think I've come to be able to find common ground with a lot of our partners, with a lot of our customers, whether they're coming from kind of a hardcore manufacturing or automotive background, or coming from a more kind of accounting or finance related perspective. There's always some interesting, interrelatable common feature among everyone, and that's something that I've really enjoyed being able to connect with and learn from those people through all those different engagements and partnerships and commercial relationships. So that's probably how some of my slightly more adventurous earlier experiences in life have allowed me to kind of tie into a lot of the professional work I'm doing now.
Yeah, and especially since you're the director of biz dev at Electrada, you got a constantly talk with a bunch of stakeholders. So let's say I'm not like a traditional stakeholder within the EV charging space. How would you explain charging as a service to me?
Great. Okay, so charging as a service is essentially an end-to-end, all-in-one charging infrastructure development service for fleets that are looking to electrify. So this is, for Electrada, we focus specifically on commercial fleets, be they private fleets or public fleets, and managing their electrification journey as they transition from diesel or gasoline powered vehicles, whether it be sedans or vans or box trucks or big heavy semi tractor trailers, to electrically fueled and electrically powered vehicles. And so what we do is we will manage all the upfront investment and all the charging infrastructure to support that fleet fuel transition. We will design all of the plans around that infrastructure. We will build it. We will own it because we invested in it, and then we'll operate it at 99% uptime. So kind of the highest industry reliability standard that you can achieve. And we'll do that for a long term over, 5, 7, 10 plus year contracts with a locked in flat rate of electricity to de-risk any price volatility in energy or fuel on behalf of our customers. And so we kind of take all of those things and we wrap them into one fixed rate, which is billed to our customers on a monthly service, kind of like a SaaS or a subscription type model.
Yeah, that's how I'm thinking about it.
Pay that monthly fee over the course of that long-term contract. And so it moves this investment criteria from being a kind of a capital expenditure, a CapEx type project. It frees up some of their capital and it becomes an OpEx for them, where they're just paying for fuel just as they would for diesel or gasoline fuel as they operate some of their pre-existing type of trucks.
Right. So from my understanding of what you just said, it's like more cost effective in the sense that they could kind of create like more like an EV fleet in a more lean fashion, and then it's just kind of operationally smoother.
That's right. So ultimately, we really don't want fleets to have to think about energy, right? I mean, for the last 70, 80, 100 years, they relied on external sources of energy. They've had the Exxon Mobils of the world or the whichever large petroleum-based product manufacturers and providers to simply come in, bring them fuel, they plug in the fuel into their vehicle, the vehicle drives away knowing that the fuel is there and it's going to work. We think that electrification should follow the exact same thing. We don't think transportation folks and fleet managers and fleet owners and operators should have to become energy experts or electricity experts. They should simply be able to run the core competencies of their business, which is taking people and things and from point A to point B to point C and back to point A, and doing that in the most cost-effective and timely and manner possible. And we want to be there to serve as their most reliable fueling service that they don't even have to think about, just like they haven't had to think about their diesel or their gasoline, the reliability of the same and the price of the same over the last several years.
Right. I really like how you allow all these like people like fleet operators and managers to kind of free their hands up and really focus on what they do best. I checked Electrada's website and it mentioned something like 360 EV charging as a service. What does that 360 portion mean?
That's it's a great question. So 360 really just refers to the kind of full end-to-end spectrum. So it's not like we're just sourcing hardware for the charging, or we're just doing software that does the management, or it's not like we're just financing the chargers, or that we're just helping with the ongoing operations and maintenance of the same. We're doing all of the above, so that it is kind of a 360, fully encompassed, circular end-to-end project management of each one of those charging infrastructure programs. And we want to do so in a way that's highly scalable and highly cost efficient, so that we're able to identify the types of vehicles where we can actually get within 10% or less of diesel or gasoline vehicle parity, of cost parity, including the cost of the vehicle plus all the infrastructure and the refueling, and help fleets design these programs around, starting with a pilot or a site or two here of 10 or 15 vehicles in 1 year, and then 30 more the following, or 50 more the following, all on a business case back decision, instead of simply relying on regulatory compliance standards or some kind of board mandated ESG goal. So that's kind of a big component of where we're pushing this is taking a more of an aggressive posture that is very much technology and business case backed, all encompassed by this 360 charging as a service offering that you mentioned there.
Right. And I imagine that scalability is also a huge benefit to charging as a service. So with like Christmas and like the holidays coming up, how does this affect some, I guess, of your clients or prospective clients?
In terms of the holiday season, how that impacts their operations, what
Yep.
charging could also affect. Yeah, it's a great question. So any fleets, obviously, well, a lot of fleets are highly seasonal in nature. They have peaks and valleys in terms of demand of the goods that they ship and manage. And so what we have to do from the charging infrastructure perspective is understand what is the maximum demand curve, what we call a load curve, the energy profile, the energy consumption demand that's going to be associated with those fleets at all times of the year. So they're not ever stuck with some charging that's only going to serve them in the middle average time or on the lower end, or not over-investing on the higher end. They need to be something that at any time of the year they can operate these set of vehicles going these places at these amount of miles, irrespective of what that season looks like. And so that's very much kind of built into our processes as we engage with new customers. We really look at their fleets, their fleet list, all their different vehicle assets. We understand how many miles they're driving a day at different stages of the year, how long they're going to be coming back to base and having and resting and charging, what we call dwell time, how quickly they need to charge, what types of makes and models of vehicles they're using, and all of that informs the way that we design and build out this charging infrastructure so that they're always going to be covered regardless of the season and regardless of the use case of the types of vehicles and the types of routes that they're running.
Yeah. I think the wide coverage of like their needs and also kind of being able to allow them to bite as much as they could chew kind of deal. So you've serviced Procter Gamble, Comcast, and other like big names. Could you walk me through like one of those as like kind of like a case study walkthrough right now?
Sure. So there's certain customers that are more or less keen to talk to their own electrification efforts. One that is particularly exciting and is investing heavily in the future of transportation is Ferguson Enterprises, and this is a company that is kind of at the forefront of innovation in terms of electrification. They understand the benefits and the power that this technology can have. They understand that this is a sustainable model, not only in terms of the environment, but also in terms of their business operations and the needs and the transition to a new technology. They fully embrace that. So we are working with them across a number of sites, different types of vehicles, from heavy duty vehicles to medium duty and others, and really designing on a site-by-site basis these very much customized programs that help them to electrify according to the use case requirements at each one of those locations. So they're a wonderful customer, a great partner, one that we're very proud to have as part of our portfolio, and one that we are very excited to continue supporting looking ahead.
I'd love to hear more about what goes into like Electrada's like CAS solution, or rather what's included if, let's say, I come up to you, Ryan, and I say like, hey, I'm interested in the CAS solution. How do we get started? And what can I expect to see in the next 30, 60, 90 days and maybe 5 years down the line?
Sure. Okay, great. So typically there's some level of initial interest from someone like you who's exploring this new technology. Maybe you've already purchased some vehicles, or you've made a purchase order for some new electric vehicles, or you're considering a couple different sites for electrification. So typically what we'll do is we'll get some information from you. We'll kind of look to understand the scale of the electrification program that you're considering, right? So how many vehicles, what types of makes and models, what locations, to understand the utility jurisdiction that those locations fall under, in which different markets of the country. So once we have that information, we'll also try and figure out, okay, what does your total fleet size look like? And how is that distributed geographically across the country? And where can we develop programmatic recommendations for you as to where you can get to, 10% of EV ICE TCO, total cost of ownership parity within those different markets, based on this kind of multi-segmented analysis that we do with our prospective customers. So we'll collect that information, put together some kind of indicative pricing that shows you what a charging as a service payment model would look like over the next 5 years or 7 years or whatever term we align on. And then once you kind of give us the green light that this is all in alignment with your own business planning and the needs of your key decision makers within the organization, then we come out and we kind of visit that site and spec it out. We'll do a walkthrough with our engineering team. We'll get to understand the ins and outs. Where would potential charging be? Where's the closest interconnection with the utility? What are potential barriers to construction? Is there a wall here? Would we need to be trenching? Would we have to get around that? And that helps kind of inform with real life data and the real life on the ground operations what our kind of final firm pricing would be like, which we then put together and that gets slotted into what we call our contract, or Electrification Services Agreement, or ESA. And once we then agree on those terms and the pricing and all of that, then we get started with the project management process and bringing in the teams, getting the designers working, getting the engineering folks working, construction ramping up. And right now we've got about 100 depots located across the U.S. and many different markets, all electrified kind of fleet-based depots. And across those nearly 100 different locations, we have been able to go from ESA signature to go live operations on average anywhere from 8 to 12 months, oftentimes 8 to 10 months. And that's, for a lot of other folks who have been in the market, try to do this themselves for a particular fleet, or other providers that, other services that we see, oftentimes that can be anywhere from 18 to 36 months. And the reason that we're able to have these, I'd say, kind of accelerated timetables and really exciting operational improvements is because we have a lot of folks from our senior leadership team who've spent 20 and 30 years working in the utilities as part of their tenure. So they understand how to work with them, what information to serve on, what processes to follow, how to develop the right relationships within those different entities so that we can get these projects up and running more quickly and in the most kind of responsible way on behalf of our fleet customers.
Definitely. And I really like how in the beginning you heavily emphasize like really understanding like your client or prospective client's needs, just because like the charging as a service solution inherently is very much like a custom solution for these people and these companies. Let's play devil's advocate, and let's say I'm just anti-CAS solution for whatever reason.
Sure.
And if you could put on your professor hat here, maybe even like try to convince me as if I was like a fifth grader. Like what is it, or educate me as if I was a fifth grader, like what does it take for a company to own their own EV charging infrastructure versus leaning into a CAS solution?
Sure. I mean, it's a wonderful question. And with in one form or another, I get asked this pretty regularly. Maybe not from a fifth grader directly or from a hypothetical fifth grader.
Right.
But certainly all the time. And so, the fleet electrification process is hugely complex. It is really tough. It requires a great deal of expertise across a wide range of subjects. So let's say you're starting totally fresh. You're looking at, maybe you've bought a couple of EVs, you're about to, and you've done nothing on the charging infrastructure. So you first have to think about how you're going to finance this, right? You got to think about, are you going to make budget for this internally? Are you going to do you have CapEx set aside to be able to allocate to this? Do you understand what the local incentive or grant programs are available to you to finance either part of the vehicle or the charging infrastructure? So you got to figure out the financials of it. Then you got to think through, okay, so let's say I have enough money in terms of aside, or I've got some good grants. Then how do I deploy those? And what do I who do I work with? So you're going to need to have obviously chargers, so that's physical hardware. So you have to go out into the market and understand who are the best chargers? Are they interoperable with my mix of different types of vehicles and makes and models of vehicles? Is there good communication? Do they follow all the regulatory standards that are out there, OCPP compliance? What kind of uptime are they going to be able to guarantee, and what's the warranty associated with that hardware? Then what's the software that's going to be running the back end to automate the charging management software or energy management software? Which one do I pick? Do I put out a bid and a separate tender, a separate RFP for the hardware and the chargeware and the software? And then, okay, so I've now selected some of those items. What utility am I working with here? What's the right tariff that I should put on for this electricity for this particular use case of vehicles? What's my load shape look like in terms of how much energy I can expect to consume at what times of day? When should I be charging at what times of day to reduce my electricity price tag? And then I got to build the whole thing, right? So I got to put out an RFP for a design firm to design the new space or work with my electrical contractor to do so. I got to do another one of those for the actual engineering itself and the construction. I got to bring all those folks in, project manage them, ensure that they're doing this on time at lower cost, at my cost of capital, or lower, or whatever. And then I need to bring in additional folks to either from the same hardware provider or others manage the ongoing, we call O&M or operations and maintenance, the uptime, the upkeep of all this stuff. And I got to train all my people who are used to driving diesel rigs for the last 70 years to adopt new technology, both in terms of the fueling standard and the vehicle itself. And all of those
that
things,
sounds like a whole lot.
It's a lot. And every one of those actors is going to have their own little piece of the pie in terms of margin. There's going to be a lot of margin stacking across the board. And a lot of them are doing this on a transactional one-off basis. So they're not necessarily incentivized to get you the most cost efficient without kind of scalable type of resource.
Right. It's just like from what I've been hearing, like a lot of like upfront costs, like that's a big thing. A lot of upfront like research that you got to do, and then figuring out like all the people within your company that have to make all these like changes, new adoptions, and so on and so forth. At what point do EVs become economically equivalent or advantageous compared to ICE vehicles or internal combustion engines for fleet operations?
It's a great question. So, there are a number of different segments which are more or less easily electrifiable today, right? I think kind of what we can say the lowest hanging fruit with today's battery technology is probably that medium duty or kind of lower duty to medium duty. So kind of, and edging into some use cases around heavy duty type vehicles. So that's kind of class 3 to class 6, 7, sometimes 8 type vehicles. And that's because a lot of those currently are doing routes that are covered by the battery ranges of those respective vehicles. And as we go through and think about what a total cost of ownership parity model would look like, we have to consider a number of different variables. We got to think about where are the different geographic markets where the cost of labor of actually building out charging infrastructure is lower and the cost of electricity is lower. We have to think about average daily mileage use cases. So having enough vehicles running enough miles per day so that you can bring down the associated cost of that charging infrastructure capex and spread it across more miles and more vehicles and get that rate really lower. And then we have to think about, where does it operationally make sense to manage this transition, right? So if you bought a beautiful new diesel truck last year, you probably don't want to replace it this year. Its operational lifetime is probably 7, 8 years long. So in the meantime, let's think about where you have model year vehicles that are already 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, and let's replace those in the markets where the labor and electricity is the cheapest, and where you have the average daily mileage use case requirements that will allow you to get to within that TCO parity profile.
Got you. I really appreciate the elaborate response. For a Fortune 500 company that wants to work with Electrada, what can be a reasonable ROI range that they can expect within the 5 to 10 years for contract duration?
So when you say, just to clarify, when you say ROI range, you mean What does an investment look like in terms of total operation, or what is the kind of the type of technology efficiency improvements they can expect? Just to clarify.
Yeah. So like upfront investment, so like costs for the contract, and then overall like cost savings for choosing charging as a service over electrifying their entire fleet, kind of like a DIY.
Got it. Great. Okay. So if they were to compare that full end-to-end spectrum of activities that I described to you, and they were to go, regardless of the size of the fleet, ultimately, truly, but if they were to DIY it themselves, manage all end-to-end parts of the process, pay for electricity at a non-flat rate, have that escalate over time, have the margin stacking that you can probably expect along the way, dedicate internal resources to managing this. There's a piece of those FTE salaries that are kind of proportion to this.
Yep.
Take all that into consideration. You can probably expect a range of 15 to 25 to 30% overspend doing it yourself versus in a charging as a service solution environment. Now, of course, there are certain use cases which align themselves better to that, right? The more scale that you have, or the more you go into scale of fleet, the more and more advantageous it becomes to use charging as a service, because we can benefit from the economies of scale that we can bring to the table, and we can get that per kilowatt hour rate lower and lower and lower, spread across more vehicles and more miles. For kind of smaller fleets, it can be with just a couple of vehicles, one or two vehicles at one or two locations. It can be cost prohibitive, honestly, to engage in charging as a service, just because maybe you're okay with just buying one charger yourself and hooking that up and managing your end-to-end process. So it kind of depends a little bit on the profile of the fleet, but there is significant savings that we demonstrate to a lot of our customers and prospective customers as they consider going out and doing this themselves versus having a partner be able to manage the end-to-end process for them.
For sure. And there's a bunch of like big companies that have that scale that could benefit the most from charging as a service solution. And some of these players are international and stuff. And fortunate enough for you, like you speak Spanish and you could be an asset in expanding like Electrada's reach. How do you see maybe international markets playing a role in the company's future growth?
It's a wonderful question. I think that we've received interest from some companies and some operations, and having our services support them internationally. I think for the time being, the North American market is massive. We're talking about ranges of estimates from $50 to $500 billion in charging infrastructure required in the next 10 years to serve commercial EV charging market needs at on-site depots, which is where we specialize. And that's, we're at a fraction, a very small fraction of that today. So that is to say that the pie size is quite significant, and there's a lot to do, and there's space for everyone in the market to do that and to work together to accomplish this goal together. And so I think we're going to be focused on North America for certainly the short term, although there's been interest in expanding and looking at additional geographies down the line.
For sure. And one last question is also under the umbrella of like thinking about the future. What's one thing you enjoy most about working at Electrada, and how do you see that impacting the company's future in the charging as a service industry?
It's a great question. I think I'm highly fortunate to work with some really fantastic colleagues who are deeply passionate about this work. Whenever I look at different companies and the teams that make them up, there's always kind of a spectrum between competency and personality. And sometimes you have highly competent, really good people at their job, and their personalities are like maybe not so great, and you're not going to really enjoy working with them. Sometimes you got really great people, and they're a lot of fun, and they're very funny and everything else, but maybe not so great at their job. This happens to be one of those beautiful little unicorns where I'm surrounded by folks who are both highly competent and also great people who are great at their job. And so that's that's been a real blessing for me, and I think that that is a fundamental ingredient for a successful company to continue scaling and growing in conjunction with our investors and our partners and our customers. And I very much believe that that is going to be one of the key ingredients for our success in 2025 and of course in the years beyond.
Awesome. Well, from what I've just heard, it seems like your company's full of the LeBron Jameses, the Stephen Currys, and the Tim Duncans of the EV charging industry. So glad to hear you're at the right place at the right time, and they're very fortunate to have you, Ryan, and I'm very fortunate to have you on the show today.
Well, as am I, I'm super fortunate and glad to have had the chance to chat with you, Sean. And thank you so much for the time. It's a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this interview, follow along on Earth EBC's LinkedIn to stay connected and never miss what's going on in climate tech. If you'd like to reach out or you're interested in coming on as a guest, feel free to connect with me, Sean Pack, on LinkedIn. We're always looking for inspiring ventures and founders in the climate space to feature on the show. Hope you enjoyed. Until next time.